I've never met this person. I've got to take that person from a fear state to a curious state within 7 seconds or less. So I'm always going to ask for something. Hey, Mike, we've never met. Got half a minute for me to show why I'm calling? 9 times out of 10, most decent humans are going to say yes.
My name's Mike Lander, and you're listening to Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast, where we bring you actionable insights about sales RFPs, negotiations, and difficult procurement discussions from sales leaders, brand leaders, and procurement leaders. Please subscribe to get updates when new episodes are released. Gerry, thanks ever so much for joining me on Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast. It's great to have you.
Awesome to be here. Thank you.
Pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this. Lots of conversation at the moment around lead generation in a tough market, as you can imagine. So it's going to be fascinating to hear your insights around sales lead generation. But first of all, who are you? What do you do? And anything slightly unusual about yourself?
Yeah, so Gerry Hill, I run a business called ConnectAndSell, US software company, and I have full P&L responsibility for our European and rest of the world programs. What do? We solve all of the inertia and the bottlenecks that make cold calling and top of funnel conversations with strangers feel ineffective, and we turn that waste and frustration into meaningful, fun and engaging work for reps. How would I describe myself day to day? I am a salesperson, but moreover these days, more of a sales economist. I'm helping leadership and boards and executives and private equity funds really determine risk, cost and value and assess best routes to market with an acute economic lens applied to strategy. Unusual stuff about me. I was once an extra in an art house movie that, in good faith, I decided to participate in as a volunteer for a friend of mine. Turned out it was a bit of a smart flick. my cameo was I was supposed to be playing like a big dock worker and so on. And then I went along to the screening of this thing. It was his student art project, and everything that happened behind me was nefarious to say the least. And what I'm really concerned about is the fact that he didn't want to cast me in one of the major roles. I was just
exactly
a wallflower in a pub scene. So,
brilliant.
And what makes it even worse is I'm a ridiculously large human being. I'm 6'7" and about 140 kilos. So,
wow, you're 6'7".
You know,
my word.
Okay.
Okay.
So I stood out very much in the context of
I bet. Yes. Is that movie still around on the internet, or do we just try and ignore that?
This was 1999.
Okay, fine.
It was burnt probably minutes after it was screened.
I was going to say it's probably buried somewhere, exactly, or hopefully burnt. Brilliant,
it was all
Gerry.
very art noir and stuff as well. It was
cool.
trying to be sort of like, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and stuff.
Yeah. Brilliant. So, before we get into the 3 questions, if you're open to it, just talk, because I think what you're doing now is quite different. I used to work with private equity funds. I know what they're like in terms of very focused on the economics and enterprise value creation. Do you want to just talk about the big picture context before we get into the specific questions?
Yeah, I think the macros are interesting at the moment. You're going to hear a lot of talking heads talk about sort of post-interest rate world or a zero interest rate world. And, I think that whilst that stuff matters the most, it's actually very few people have got an understanding of how the companies that they work for and serve ultimately are funded.
Yep.
So if I'm a company, there's a strong chance I'm owned by private investment. In 9 times out of 10, that private investment is drawn from limited partners. Those limited partners could be asset management companies, or they could be our pension funds, or they could be high net worth family offices and individuals.
Yep.
Then that capital gets deployed around meaningful bets. If I'm investing into companies as an asset class, I'm looking at 3 real metrics that I care about. What are the efficiency ratios of those companies? Can I take the efficiency ratio as it is today pre-investment and make it better, thus squeezing more opportunity from my invested dollar?
Yep.
Can I radically transform the operating tempo of that business? It's the old joke, which is private equity always takes a company from Andrex to 2-sheet ply. And then the other element is, what are the levers of value creation that I can offer and support to a company in order for them to be able to do delivery of model better? What we found is a rise of a new and emerging job role inside private equity. It's called the operating partner or the operating partner.
Absolutely.
Executive. And they've got an acute lens on trying to support value creation within the portfolio companies.
Yep.
They kind of feel like a McKinsey kind of dude, but working in the business and around the business. Their job is loosely defined, but the majority of it is working on strategy, go-to-market execution, finding signals, tying up operational elements, working with vendors to create, scalability. Yep. When we talk about go-to-market operating partners, they're very, very good typically, I find, in marketing narrative, and they're very good in what I would call discovery sales to close, to quote, and measurement. But there's this little gap that exists somewhere between marketing and sales execution, which I would call pure play top of funnel selling. And that's the gap that we're trying to cover and add an additional layer of competency to their world. Ultimately.
Amazing. And that is absolutely the gap. And that's whether you're private equity funded, whether you're private family funded at a smaller scale, or whether you're a management buyout team. I think everyone in this market has got the same problem. I mean, everyone's saying basically, where are we now? We're now in August 24. Yeah. The market slowed down. It's not my fault. So, we're down 30% on budget. And I'm like, well, yeah, the market has changed. But to just accept it's the market's fault and therefore I'm going to do nothing about it seems to me a bit bizarre as an owner. And you must face a lot of that kind of conversation.
We've seen a lot of do nothing this year, and we found inaction and status quo much more compelling competitor than anything we'd see in the market typically.
Right.
My sense is we probably need to do a lot more headlock and push than we've ever done before.
Right.
And that's the behaviour change for me, because I've always worked in strong, high value, consultative. If we get the scope right and the execution right, then naturally close takes care of itself. But I'm actually having to relearn right now how to go out and aggressively close deals with people.
Right.
So that's a new skill that I'm having to relearn as a result of the macros. I think the other side of it is, I call it a set of fears, fascinations, and opportunities that people tend to have around system design or process improvement. They're fearful because it means that something's going to change in their life, their day-to-day, the meaningful work that they do, potentially be displaced, or they could be made to look a little bit silly for having not thought of a thing beforehand. And I find that lens is even greater at the moment because people are more concerned about job preservation than they've ever been.
Definitely.
And rightly so. I think the fascinations are real interesting curiosity sets around what if, what would, why would, possibilities.
Yep.
And opportunities is, well, how can I take my curiosities and turn that into actual future state? Where I fear for the industry as a whole is we've been so heavily integrated into price reduction, competitive markets, especially in my world, which is software and technology, that I think a lot of people have actually undervalued what they do, and they don't have the gravitas to be able to actually go and speak to a senior prospect in a company that you want to work with and actually go, well, here are the fears that we should commonly see, here are the fascinations that we commonly see, and here are the opportunities. Which do you care about the most?
Yeah.
And, that's a radical reframe for a lot of people, especially, the production line of sales development as an entry-level career role into AE. Nobody's got any business acumen anymore. So nobody's thinking about those questions. So I don't necessarily see it as a function of the market. It's more a case of nobody in market currently today, apart from a rare few of a generation like mine and yours, have ever actually seen down markets before and know how to behave in and around them and understand what it takes. So who's teaching them that? Because the first line leaderships were not old enough to remember 2009, for example.
Exactly.
So you've got to be very, very sort of thoughtful about sort of what the reframe looks like, how you rebalance your labour, what do you care about the most. Yeah. My sense is there's a strong market right now for really experienced sort of 50X-year-olds who've probably been on a beach for a few years. They're probably concerned about pension top-ups, and we know that they can come in and just execute on gravitas alone. Yeah. And an opportunity to rehire from that pool of latent capability. But I don't think anybody's imaginative enough to start doing that kind of stuff.
I think that's a brilliant point. But I would, because I'm 60. No, it's really interesting. Is that did you see the recent Salesforce State of Sales report that came out? Yeah, and that the trusted advisor is now back. Unsurprisingly, in tough markets, executives want to have business conversations with people that they believe they can trust and that have got insights and have got some thought leadership and a view on the world.
And look, practical example of that is me and my CEO, Chris Beale, the other day, we had a breakthrough and we've actually undervalued what we do as a company in a lot of instances. We've got into this world of trying to create product for people and sell product and sell licenses, and that's all great, but it also comes with massive incumbent challenges, which is somebody needs to manage that, somebody needs to mitigate for the churn, somebody needs to take day-to-day ownership of making something work.
Yep.
Actually, if you've got underlying technology that potentially has more value to a market than your product version of your technology does, why wouldn't you just sell the underlying technology?
Yeah, exactly right.
Can benefit from that at scale. And so it's forcing, I think, people into being a lot more realigned to what value they provide. And it's also forcing people to think about, well, what can't I do today that I know I need to do? But at the moment, the gateway for a license, for a rep, for however you monetize it, just feels like too much of a project.
Yeah.
But actually, if you can make it super strategic and say, well, we've got a market exclusivity play for here, we're going to do this in 5 weeks, we're going to take it to 5 of your competitors, X, Y, Z, all of a sudden, you're creating demand in the market for an underlying capability that otherwise didn't exist if you're just trying to sell it upstream like you normally would.
Yep.
And I'm wondering how many other people are going to catch on to that thesis at some point.
Absolutely. And I think, you talked before about the value of your products or services that you put into the marketplace. As an ex-buyer, an ex-procurement buyer, one of my views was if a vendor, partner, supplier, whatever you want to call that third party, if they can't explain the value, the differentiation, the uniqueness, the ROI, the economic value creation, and why they stand out, if they can't explain that, and I see them more as a commodity, then I'll just treat them as a commodity. That's their fault, not my fault.
Yeah, because you never want to be in the papers and pen paper.
No. No.
Yeah,
exactly. You want to be in the top right-hand corner, high impact on their profit, very rare to find that capability, so you become a strategic partner.
Yeah, exactly right. And it takes time to get there. I think people are always trying to either do one or two things. I think we've got this obsession of big deal culture as well in SaaS, which is unhealthy. I understand why it's necessary for a lot of companies, especially a company like mine, which is bootstrapped. We like big upfront deals because that's how we fund our company ultimately and push off risk. But, I'm not myopic enough to say that, a small deal that can expand to a massive deal over 12 years isn't a bad thing for you either.
Exactly.
You've got to be fairly reasonable about what you see on the ground.
Yep.
And I'm curious about the economic impact of lost opportunity because people got really myopic about the fact that it didn't fit within a pricing pro forma or a size of right to participate.
Yep. Absolutely.
Fascinated about that.
Yeah. So let's get into the questions, Gerry. So is outbound sales dead? If not, why not? So this is all kind of top of funnel stuff.
Yeah, it is, and no, it's not. I think, that's not a very explicit answer for you, but it serves massive utility until you become market dominant. And when you become market dominant, you've got alternatives. It's still fundamentally the cheapest way that you can get your message to market.
Right.
For me, companies in the innovation economy who don't have scalable marketing or channel differentiation is how scrappy companies can get started and be proactive about informing their own destinies. My big issue at the moment is how many bad and unworthy companies there are in the world because companies are super easy and cheap to create these days.
Yep.
So that's creating massive mind fog for absolutely everybody by channel. And, how do you differentiate? How do you stand out? It's like an arms race for the most extreme form of messaging now, which probably doesn't do a good thing for the industry at all.
Yep.
Whoever invented the cold FaceTime deserves to be strung up and shot, in my opinion. But that's kind of where we're getting to in terms of extremes to be able to help people get to a quota. The other reason why I think it's dead is people have forgotten what the fundamentals are, which are everybody's chasing in market opportunities today because of the short-term nature of business cycles in 2024. Actually, outbound is a bigger, longer-term process that is designed to help you curate trust and credibility over 12 quarters of execution.
Right.
So if you don't have a playbook that's designed for that, then it's always going to fail because you're constantly switching your experiments, your staff, your resources, your labor, your messaging, and your models.
Very good point.
You haven't done anything to sustain it. And a sustainable outbound works and an unsustainable outbound doesn't. And And also, you just got to be really mindful about channel selection. Like, certain markets are going to have a high propensity to email, some are going to have a high propensity for social, some are going to have a high propensity for events. I regard events as outbound, by the way.
So do I.
And then some markets can have a high propensity for phone. And then you've got to be able to be disciplined and nuanced to work in the channel. My big fear about why outbound is dead, though, is rise of automation, has curated reasons for prospects to not engage with credible sellers. And that's just made it really difficult for the people that are in the market who are credible. So it's not dead for those with the goods, the means, the wills, the patience, and the resources to be able to sustain a 12-quarter view. For everyone else that's just like trying to hunt the meeting on the first call today, it's a failure. So it does nothing for your seller, it does nothing for your prospect.
Exactly right. And just irritates people. And I think, with the advent of, God forbid, AI-generated personalized emails, it's like, you can spot them a mile off. And I think it is starting to really irritate people so that they're filtering out more and more and more from their inbox.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. And, I think the other big debate in outbound at the moment is this sort of thesis around personalization and relevance. And I think personalization as a concept's been completely corrupted. Before it was show me, you know me. Now it seems to be show me, you know me, but in a very creepy way.
Right. And
nobody likes that. It's an invasive feeling. The biggest fear that most
humans... don't know them. It's like you don't know this person, and yet you found out that basically they play squash and they were county champion.
Like bullhorns, right? Like it's nonsense.
Yeah.
And it's false and it's fake and it's disingenuous. And some people might respond to it well because their egos and narcissism as a prospect are super, super natural. But for most ordinary humans who just want to go about getting their job done, it's insane.
Yeah.
And, but you can show somebody you know them by understanding their business problem and
exactly.
resonate with that,
The industry they're in, the kind of problems typically that those companies face in that industry.
And then jobs to be done. People don't look at it enough for them top of funnel messaging. I've got this high relevance thesis, which is understand the job to be done about the prospects that you want to engage with. And you can scale that, by the way. Right. I can look at a list of chief revenue officers and broadly speaking, know within 5% either side of the job description what the economic job to be done is, what the waste job to be done is, what the frustration job to be done is, and what the emotional component of failure around all of those things looks like.
Right. And
I can turn that into 20 seconds.
Wow.
And then I can do that again for a RevOps person. I can do that for a CFO and so on. And am I going to get it right all the time? No. But for outbound, if I get it right 5 to 10%, I'm outpacing the market, especially with an enhanced conversation flow, because now I've got measurement signals that I can play back into my system of design. So it becomes intentional design. It's not, I've got a feeling that we should be saying this to somebody with no evidence.
So without this becoming some crazy role play, because that's not what we started off with, Gerry, at all. But just talk to us about, that kind of first engagement, whether it's via email or whether it's via a call. Broadly, what do you think works to get someone's attention enough to go, this person isn't an idiot, they're not being offensive, they're just trying to start a conversation?
If I'm writing like a CEO writes, which is very short. Emails feel like WhatsApps or text. They don't feel like War and Peace.
Right.
So my email engagements typically be something like, hey, Mike, wanted to discuss a breakthrough results in $25,000 in pipeline production per hour of time invested per seller. Companies like XYZ are using this to achieve breakthrough results. Sounds too good to be true. Want to meet?
Right.
That would be the message. That's a paragraph, half a sentence. It feels like a WhatsApp. Yep. I'm using bad grammar on purpose. I'm using equal signs and apostrophes and stuff in the wrong places just so that it draws people in. And it's measurable for me at that point. After that, for cold calls, I'm still a great believer in one of the death spiral debates on LinkedIn is, permission-based openers or business equal owner. Permission-based, why? Because I'm a stranger. I've never met this person. I've got to take that person from a fear state to a curious state within 7 seconds or less. So I'm always going to ask for something. Hey, Mike, we've never met. Got half a minute for me to show why I'm calling?
Right.
9 times out of 10, most decent humans are going to say yes to them.
Yeah.
Great. Problem statement. We're working on solving glitchy pipeline issues that most sales leaders seem to experience in 2024. Reason for my call was I believe we've discovered a breakthrough which enables you to cover your market 1,200% faster, 85% cheaper. Think of it as a way to get 9 conversations like the one you and I are having for your sellers every single hour. Right. I just wanted to see if I could grab 20 minutes with you to discuss this breakthrough. You got your calendar available?
Right.
20 seconds or less. But there's an economic element, there's a speed element, there's a job failure element, there's a frustration element, but neatly packaged into content.
And it didn't
Guess what I didn't do? I didn't talk about my product.
No, correct. You just
if I talk about my product, I can get somebody categorizing me. Yeah. And if I get categorized, then they can leave the conversation with their dignity intact by saying this one thing. No, I'm covered. I'm good. And how do you come back from that?
Exactly.
So,
I've heard people recently say
intentional design. I think that's the key point.
There's this crazy. I thought actually, Jerry, that's really good. Very grown up, sensible conversation. 20 seconds, and I can easily go, thanks, interesting, but no. But could you send me something?
Yeah.
Better than I've had 2 or 3 recently. Hi, mate, you're going to hate me. It's a sales call.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, you've put hate in my head. So yeah probably. Exactly. I'm probably going to hate you. I'm going to say no. I might laugh and smile and then put the phone down, but that's as far as you'll get.
Well, do you remember about 15 years ago when society probably wasn't as precious as it is now? There was the whole sort of psychology of dating with the negging, and there was the whole book thing where you deliberately be a little bit mean to girls and stuff in order to get their attention.
Right.
What I find with those sort of self-deprecating, you're probably going to hate me as much as I hate doing it myself kind of conversations, is I'll never, ever, ever elevate in your mind's eye to business value or business equal because I've already put myself on a lower pedestal. Yeah. However, being polite to a stranger that you've never met before is completely different. And again, it's part of that nuclear arms race about how do I differentiate, how do I stand out?
Yep.
And, I think people being negative against themselves is such a fool's errand, but, why would they not be better?
I would agree. And it does it indicates all sorts of things to me, which is like they're not serious business people. So I'm not going to have a conversation. I'm not going to waste my time.
Yeah.
So really
that's it. So outbound can be optimized. It can be made to work. It's hard work. Nobody seems to have any tolerance for doing hard work in order to make a very scalable and cheap route to market work for themselves. And that's the big frustration is everybody's just looking for shortcuts and hacks right now.
Exactly. And as someone said to me the other day, your only objective really initially is to get the next conversation. What you just did. Have you got your diary? Have you got 20 minutes? That's all you're trying to do, isn't it? It's just generate the next conversation.
We're riffing on this term at the moment around just brilliant basics is probably the next innovation in sales, and it's going to take us back to where we probably all came from in the late 90s, early 2000s. Focus on the fundamentals, and which is have a conversation, follow up, nurture. That's it.
Correct. Have a conversation, follow up, nurture, and do what you say you'll do.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you're going to send I was taught many, many, many years ago, back in the late 90s about selling was, simple things like, why don't I just send you our latest thought leadership paper? It's not a sales document, it's a thought leadership paper on your industry and the dynamics, the issues that people seem to be facing. Yeah. Would that be helpful? Well, yeah, that sounds quite helpful. Okay, fine. So you send that, and then you have a follow-up conversation, and so it goes on. My longest sales cycle, Jerry, is 10 years. Hopefully. Recently a few have been a bit quicker than that, but it takes time. It just takes time to get to know people. Yeah. And there is no shortcut.
Right. And I think people just need to be realistic about that. Like, you've got in-market opportunities at 3% of the market every quarter, and you've got out-of-market opportunities where you create the demand.
Yeah.
My big fear today is with all the cleverness and the technology tricks and hacks, everybody pointing all of their resources at the in-market opportunities.
Yep.
And then everybody wonders why they're not closing business. Well,
exactly.
You're just mopping up the soft demand in the market with people that are never going to be loyal customers because they're inherently already expert on the problem set. So, what have I taught anybody? How have I given anybody else a compelling McKinsey level perspective? How have I shown them value economics? How have I done any of the cool work?
Yeah.
As opposed to, okay, who are you competing with? Well, this is how we're different. Great, we'll send you a deck.
Yeah.
And we'll put together an evaluation. Is it too late to enter,
And just on that point, Chris, Gerry, we haven't talked about this, but just get your thought on SDRs, the role of SDRs going forward. What's your thought, Gerry?
I don't necessarily want to resource a sales team with SDRs if my price point is below 10,000 ACV.
Right.
Because they're just grinding out too much drudgery to make that cost of acquisition worthwhile for me.
Yeah.
Where I've probably got a mindset for them now is sort of high teams of tiger teams, careerist SDRs, not early entry SDRs, where the value to time makes sense and where I can compress as much of the worst part of the job away from them.
Right.
And that's essentially what my product and proposition offers, which is I take a really good SDR or an AE, I reduce 90 minutes of waste, and I return a conversation every 4 minutes as opposed to a conversation every 90 minutes.
Wow.
That's an example of this sort of special forces hypothesis, which is starting to emerge, which is I think we've come out of like the Victorian era of warfare, which is big team, set piece battle. My resources are greater than your resources. My headcount equates to more coverage. Whereas now I've got potentially an opportunity to redesign a team. They're all very good at everything, but they're specialists in something.
Right.
And they take ownership of that specialism and then they execute accordingly. And I tell you, can 5 people, and I've applied $1 million of resource to those 5, and I've turned that 5 into 50. That would be my SAS Delta Navy SEAL kind of analogy drawn against the traditional infantry unit, which may or may not still have a place. But I don't believe that if you've got an articulate proposition and you've got motivated and mobile reps who are very agile, business focused, scientific in the way that they approach their day and have got the ability to execute and provision feedback at scale and use data well, why wouldn't you deploy that instead as the alternative? I think the reason being is too many people have attached their careers to big teams.
Right.
And I get really frustrated when I'm looking at resumes because we only hire in people as individual contributors to ConnectAndSell if they've actually done some sort of sales leadership in B2B.
Yep.
And a number of resumes I see screening ad hoc, which are like, I built the company from 0 to 100 million. No people.
No people.
Show me the number.
Exactly.
I'd be really impressed if you'd grown the company from 0 to 100 million with 4 heads.
Yeah, exactly.
Then I'll have a conversation with you because I want to understand how you did it.
Yep.
Right? So I think we measure the wrong stuff too much.
Exactly. Yeah. So just like kind of moving on to the next kind of third question, really about scaling. So as you've just discussed, this isn't about creating a 100-person team, but how do you scale outbound? What are the kind of economics behind an efficient ecosystem as opposed to a bloated ecosystem, I would say?
Yeah, I think the efficiency comes from the work product that you do day to day. We've lived in a generation which is sort of soft market expansion engagement as opposed to direct market penetration. Engagement is predicated on the idea that I know where my customer is going to be eventually, and I'll try and make them across all channels at all times in all ways.
Yeah.
But that actually doesn't have any science applied to it because trying to capture the measurement points there are all proxy measures. There's nothing that I can actually relate to as a fundamental lever to pull.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's sort of sentiment. It's not direct feedback. So I've been working on this sort of construct recently, which is trying to apply everything that our good friends in software engineering and agile do to create products, which is an agile framework, which means that hyper-structured days, those days are revolve around 3 to 4 critical sprints. Those sprints have got a very specific theme, market, geo, message, or campaign pillar attached to them. You go all out on the sprint, you decompress, you learn, you feedback, you cycle back. Then you go again on the next break to break up the monotony, and then you go again, and then you do it again. And then you've got consistent measurement. Now, the overlay for that is gamification to make the work fun, because actually you're now mandating work to people again, which is a rare management principle in 2024, but actually needs to come back into fashion. And then the other thing is you're measuring on a jobs to be done measurement framework as opposed to just like quota attainment. So I've got this hyper accurate thesis now, which is if I can model time against each sprint and understand the outcomes and the behaviors that I want to apply to it, I can then burn down to a goal and I can measure everything off the deviation of that burn down.
Right.
So I'm now either above the line, I'm failing, or I'm below the line, I'm accelerating.
Right.
And because I've got insight like that, all of a sudden I know which I can scale against and where I can start to apply more resource, more investment to the bets that I need to make. It's not to neglect all the other work, but it's taking a huge amount of the sentiment and the gut feel out of the process, and it's actually framing it in a very, very specific way. Now, none of this stuff works unless you can apply velocity to it. So, scale comes with velocity, and that's where your force multipliers start to make a big difference. And I think you can only scale outbound once you've got existing systems and processes in place, because it's like any input lever.
Exactly.
If it's shitty inputs, you get shitty out.
Correct.
And I've probably also got one dedicated resource, not a team, allocated to market exploration and finding those adjacent market opportunities, not the ones that are core today.
Yep.
So that we can start to model in what the potential friction points looks like. So, that's an even higher tier of special forces. It's kind of like a trailblazer role.
Yes.
Somebody that can collect information, synthesize it, act as a business concierge into the market, test messaging for you and with you, but actually acts very independently and separately away from the core team and is incentivized slightly differently as a result.
So they're your kind of scouts.
Yeah, I like that term. I hadn't thought about it, but I'm going to start using it.
Because they are, aren't they? They're out there exploring.
They're your reconnaissance missions.
Yeah, exactly. And then they're coming back with information and they're feeding that back into central intelligence.
But the big way for it to work, the only way for it to work is it requires executive buy-in. And I think for sales development and outbound in 2024, it's become a highly tactical job, and people have forgotten the fact that it's got massive strategic value.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like this ongoing debate at the moment. Who should RevOps report into? Should be the CFO, in my opinion, because they own the data and the cost and the risk. It shouldn't be the CRO, because I don't think every function deserves its own operational concierge.
Yeah.
And in much the same way that I think sales development should actually report directly through to the CEO, because it's first contact with the market. And for me, the most important job is first contact with the market.
Absolutely. So, yeah. I mean, and just to kind of draw this together, any business with an investor of some kind, be that a personal investor or be it a PE fund, you've got to grow. Well, to grow, you need to drive sales and you need to deliver high quality results to your clients so they stick with you at an efficient cost base.
Yeah, exactly.
And we seem to have forgotten the entire, well, not forgotten, people just, they don't want to talk about the entire sales bit and how difficult it is.
It's interesting, isn't it? There was a turn in the market at some point, and I don't know quite when it happened, but when I left university, I didn't want to get into sales. I wanted to be in a hedge fund or an investment bank or a trader. That was where all the glamour was when I was a 21-year-old man. And now people are rejecting those careers in favor of early entry tech sales roles.
Right.
And there's a huge amount of bloat as a result, and the compensation models have got completely out of whack with the value.
Yep.
And people are just getting a foot in the door so that they can do the next job, not the job that we need them to do today.
Exactly.
That compounds cost because there's hidden management burden there associated, there's churn burden associated, there's, but unfortunately everyone in the world reads the same fucking books. And they read the same
Precisely.
fucking books and do the same fucking things. So,
correct. Exactly. Yeah. We're just scaling shit. A guy I had on the other week was saying that he does outbound. He's got a small outbound team himself. It's like 6-7 people. And he says, the worst thing that happens to us is we get people that want to become the sales director and the CEO, and their entry point is, well, I'll start on outbound calls. And he said, they always fail. You want people who are career salespeople in one aspect of the sales value chain. And then you'll succeed.
It's like the Reed Hastings hypothesis, right? Which is Netflix doesn't promise anybody anything other than the job that they're applying for today.
Right.
No career paths, nothing. You get paid really well to do that. Really high area of specialism, really well.
Right.
And if you don't do that and you get frustrated or you want to do something else, there might be a home for you here, but actually I'm not going to mismanage your expectations and promise you that there is a home.
Yeah, exactly. Gerry, it's been amazing. Genuinely interesting, thought-provoking, amazing, thoroughly enjoyable. Thanks for joining me on the Higgle B2B Sales Club podcast. Really enjoyable. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so I always give my phone number out because I hate email. I hate getting email. So my number's UK 07702034081. I take pretty much any call that anyone ever makes. LinkedIn, I'm quite visible. Gerry Hill, ConnectAndSell. My avatar is a ChatGPT generated version of what I would be if I was a superhero.
I saw that. It's quite fun.
And yeah, that's pretty much it. Those are the two places you'll find me. Quite active in our revenue scenes in the United Kingdom. So if you belong to Pavilion, Revenue Collective, CRO Connected, Sales Development Leaders of EMEA, probably knocking around in those places as well.
Brilliant. Gerry, it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast series with your host, Mike Lander. Please subscribe so that you'll catch all the next episodes.